All right, guys.
All right. Good morning. My name is Aaron Harry. I'm an alderman in the city of Waukesha. I'm also the marketing and public relations manager here at VACK Regency. VACK Regency is at 280 Regency Court. It's a platform for entrepreneurs to come and share ideas. It's also the home of the VACK Group, a real estate investment company investing in our area. It's also the home of Malkin Solutions, an international nationwide consulting group, improving both small and large business processes and training. We're very happy to have a representative from District 97, Scott Allen here, friend of mine who serves in our state government. And we're going to have a conversation today about some state issues. And please stay tuned in because we're going to have some fun questions at the end as well. Thank you, Scott.
My pleasure.
Appreciate you being here. First off, transparency in state government is something that I know is important to you.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about what the state assembly or state senate, as well as maybe the governor, is working on in that aspect.
Well, I understand that it's more than transparency in state government, transparency in government in general. So that's local as well as school districts, things like that.
Sure.
I think what we have to do is start from sort of our history of Wisconsin being very strong in terms of being a transparent government state. We have very stringent open records requirements and laws, open meetings requirements. Those are all good things. But those concepts were put into our state government at a time when we have limited technology. And so, you know, just think about it. We have an open records law. And by records, we're thinking like paper copies of things, right? That's our mindset when we think open records laws. So the laws were structured in a way that would give the public access to otherwise hidden documents.
Sure.
Well, today, with the technology that exists, we have the ability to share information much more quickly than we ever had before.
Mm-hmm.
And people have the ability to search records or information or data about what the government is doing, utilizing tools that didn't exist ever before. And so what we have to do is begin to look at what would be that open government platform for the 21st century and begin to reshape what our standards are based upon that technology. An example, I introduced in the last legislative session a Budget Transparency Act bill that would require the dissemination of information of proposals that are being considered by the state government and in terms of the Joint Finance Committee to publicize that information on a web platform so that it is easily accessible by anyone in the state at any time. The current practices for that is that if you want to know what the Joint Finance Committee is considering on the day that they're going to be voting on something, you have to be in the Joint Finance Committee hearing room and obtain a printed copy of the proposals that they're considering.
Okay.
You know, we can do better than that.
Yeah.
We can do better than that. Furthermore, I've had a number of conversations since the introduction of that bill with a number of people that are interested in watching what's going on in local government and in school districts. And they're saying, you know, there's a cumbersomeness in terms of searching for things or identifying trends or identifying information because the records are still treated as paper copies. Yes, they may be converted to electronic form in the sense of being a PDF, but they're not searchable based upon values or content. So we should be able to evolve our information dissemination practices to a point where they're readily accessible. So somebody should be able to go online and search for keywords, for instance, and see what's being considered in a local government or a school district or state government based on keywords. If they're interested in parks, for instance, or if they're interested in forestry, or if they're interested in healthcare, they should be able to search those documents for those relevant words to be able to zero in on the information that they're looking for. So I don't have the proposals that we're in the process of researching that now to say, how can we revolutionize and update, modernize, if you will, our open records requirements in Wisconsin to be more user-friendly?
I would think, wouldn't that make our job, me as an alderman, you as an assemblyman, wouldn't that make our job probably easier?
Well, you know,
If those things were readily available or searchable for constituents, that they wouldn't need to. I mean, I don't mind any contact, and I'm sure you don't either. But if people could find it online, I would think that would be a lot easier.
well, our job is to represent the people, and we can do our job better when the people are informed versus when they're in the dark.
Yeah, well, that's great. Let's talk about tax reform. What taxes do we've had a lot of tax reform since Governor Walker's been in office, since you've been in office in 2014. What other tax reforms do you foresee, coming with the current form of government, with the Republicans being in office, and what do we maybe need to continue to fix?
So the Governor Scott Walker, has rightly targeted the real estate property taxes being the most heinous of taxes. If you look at surveys of residents in the state of Wisconsin, most people will identify the property tax, real estate property tax, as being the most problematic. It's problematic for young people looking to buy their first home. It's problematic for older folks who are on a fixed income, who can't afford to stay in their homes when their property values continue to grow. He has done an excellent job of targeting the real estate property taxes and making sure that we keep that at a low or reasonable level. In fact, he's lowered the property tax. This last session, we were able to eliminate the statewide real estate property tax. We were one of a handful of states in the nation that had a statewide property tax.
Sure.
And when investors are looking at investing, that's on the checklist, you know?
Yeah.
And so getting rid of that as a checklist item to say that we're no longer one of those states that has a statewide property tax makes us more competitive. Well, that being said, I think there's some opportunities. A number of years ago, they halved the responsibility, HALF, the responsibility of the local technical colleges. So the state government said, we're going to pick up half the tab on that, and the local tech colleges still property tax the other half.
Okay.
I'd like to see us eliminate that other half that they're taxing at the local level based upon property values. The need for a technical education, in my opinion, is irrespective. I don't know, I'm not getting the right word there. It doesn't matter what the local property values are.
Yeah.
We still need a good technical education system.
Yeah, we do.
And so I think eliminating that from the real estate property tax bill, taking away those technical colleges' ability to tax locally on the real estate property tax, I think is the next step. And I hope that we have the courage to take that step. And one final piece I'll say is that we still as a state have amongst the highest income taxes in the country. So while we have made great gains, we have largely ignored that income tax, and we need to go after that. We need to flatten that out. Our highest level rate, which directly impacts those who would be investors in this state, would be job creators in the state, is, in my opinion, punitive. Now, more so than just the investing, we also have a labor issue in the state of Wisconsin. We don't have enough people to fill all the jobs.
That's true. Yeah.
And we frankly need people to work a second job. And we should give them the incentive to do so. But if we're taxing that extra income at as a higher rate as we are, it takes away some of that incentive. So I think given the labor situation, let's give them that incentive, and we'll see revenue come in because people will take that incentive and work those extra hours. They'll pick up a second job. They'll fill some of the empty positions that are open now.
Yeah, honestly, I think I honestly hadn't given that thought, that perspective, but that makes a lot of sense. 'Cause yeah, we do need people to work more, and we need that incentive, of course.
Right.
And especially with the job situation the way it is. I think both of us are thankful to have a couple of jobs.
Yeah.
I would certainly welcome that incentive as well. Let me ask you about something. I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about, so I'm going to let you kind of speak about it.
So I could say anything and you would have no clue.
Well, I looked it up, but I'm not an expert on it. You are. That's why you're here.
Well,
But the status of the Property Tax Assessment Study Group, that's something that I am very interested in because, again, I work in local government, and I get asked about tax assessments all the time. My property was increased in assessment of $24,000 a year ago, which I looked at as a positive thing. It means my property's worth more, and property values in the district that I represent have been going up. But talk to me a little bit about this, the study group, and what might come out of that.
sure. So I'm privileged to have been selected to be the vice chair of this, what they call Legislative Council Study Group, which is typically held during the even year summers. So it's election year summers, where
Okay.
there's not a lot of legislative activity.
Sure.
And it is, these study groups are committees that are put together of both legislators as well as, I don't want to say lay persons, but people that are from the private or nonprofit sectors that are heavily involved and have an area of expertise or knowledge about the subject matter.
Okay.
So in this particular case, the subject matter being property tax assessments as it relates to commercial structures. So we have really an outstanding committee, and I brought the committee list with me because I wanted to reference it.
Sure.
We have someone from the pharmacy and retail operations from Walgreens. We have a principal with Cushman and Wakefield, the Berkey Company, involved. We have the Appleton County Board Chair involved. We have an attorney who specializes in property tax assessment issues. We have a number of legislators, including myself. Senator Luther Olson is the chair of the committee. I'm sure. We also have Don Millis, who is an attorney with Reinhard Berner and is a leading authority on the subject. We also have Rocco Vida, who's the director of assessment services for the Village of Pleasant Prairie, which, as you know, has Amazon, Uline, has some major commercial developments down there. And central to it is there's an appeals process. So if a property owner has their property assessment and they question that assessment, they can go through an appeals process to say, I don't think this is right. And what's happened is some of these commercial properties have been over-assessed and they've won their appeals. And that's put a lot of municipalities in a situation where they've had to refund money.
Right.
And some of these appeals processes take quite a long time. So we've got a number of issues at stake. One is, what's a fair process for conducting those property assessments? Now, on the appraisal side, when an appraisal is conducted, you've got three methods that are typically used in appraisals. One is a comparable based method based on sales. So let's just take our houses, for example. We live in a not too distant neighborhood from one another.
Right.
If you have three houses that sold in your neighborhood that are of similar size, then they have a similar location, similar size, and they've got most recent sales, we can use that comparable data to say this is probably what your home is worth. And that's fairly accurate. The next method is what they call a cost approach, which is to say if your house were to burned down and you need to rebuild it, your insurance company would use that approach.
Sure.
Say, well, what would it cost to rebuild that? And that's an approach for getting the value. The third method is what they call the income approach, which is a lot of times used for commercial properties.
Okay.
That if you're renting out space, what's the income that the property is generating? And that can be used to estimate value. Well, so they also apply these then on the property assessment side. And there's some rules that the assessors have to follow for doing so. But what's interesting is that when you get into some of these larger structures, well, oftentimes there aren't two just alike. They may be, built according to specifications for a particular manufacturer and have value for that manufacturer or that manufacturing process, but maybe not value for another manufacturer.
Okay.
And so, for instance, the cost approach in that case might not be sufficient. Or for that matter, if we look at the income approach, a lot of times in commercial transactions, there are creative ways to structure deals. Sale and leaseback situations, ground lease situations, a number of different scenarios where you structure it so that all parties walk away happy. So let's make it simple. Let's suppose 3 of your neighbors were renting out their houses. And 2 of the neighbors were renting at a paltry $500 a month for a 2,000 square foot
Oh,
house.
goodness, I'd love to pay that. Yeah.
And one neighbor was renting at maybe market rent, which might be around $1,500 or $1,600 or $1,700 a month, let's say. The one that's renting at $1,500 or $1,600 or $1,700 a month, is their property worth less because the other 2 neighbors are renting at $500 a month?
I guess my answer would be no.
No. Well, so that's the application that they're trying to use with the commercial properties.
Right.
Is to say, we're going to bring in the lease considerations, how much we're getting on a monthly rent basis, and use that to determine the value. Well, if there's a creative financing structure involved, it may not be working. So what we're trying to do is sort out what are the best methods that we can use, that we can employ on the commercial properties to make sure that we have fair assessments to begin with. Understand that we have a constitutional requirement that all property types be treated equally. So residential properties and commercial properties and agricultural properties have to be treated equally as it relates to our property tax. That's a constitutional requirement. So that complicates things because some states don't have that, and they can charge certain property types more, if you will, or at a different rate or what have you. So we have to make sure that we tax based upon value, so we have to agree on how we assign that value. The thing that concerns me the most, and what I'm going to bring to this committee, is how can we shorten that appeal process so that municipalities are not stuck in a situation where you've already spent the money. And then when the appeal comes back, now all of a sudden you got to fork out that cash to refund the money that you've already spent.
Yeah.
That seems fundamentally unfair to me. And so if there's a way that we can tighten that appeals process and maybe impose some restrictions on that refund process so that maybe if there's a reassessment that's done, that it's not retroactive, for instance.
Sure.
That it would be a go forward kind of thing. So again, we haven't had any meetings yet. Our first meeting is coming up. I do want to encourage the listeners that you can go onto if you Google WI legislature, and then you can go to the service agencies tab and click on the legislative
regional transportation, and they had a lot to lend on that topic.
Yeah.
You're in the state legislature. Transportation, I think everybody agrees there's a gap a little bit in what we have funded and what we need. And I guess that's what I want to ask you about. What do you think?
Yeah, so the funding levels, I think current funding levels are good. If you look, for instance, and you compare the record under Walker and Walker's investment in transportation versus Doyle's investment in transportation, Walker is doing a far superior job. Where we have a problem is that we have in essence, a structural funding formula problem that's unsustainable long term.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that everybody, for the most part, agrees on. Is where do we get to a sustainable point?
Yeah. So we have, for instance, we're having growing numbers of hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles that aren't consuming gasoline at all, and our funding formula is based on a gasoline tax.
Right.
So let's project 50 years from now. Let's say everybody's driving electric vehicles. I don't know. Well, if everybody's driving electric vehicles and we fund our roads based upon a gas tax, well, we're not going to have much revenue to work with.
We're in trouble.
Yeah, so we've got to find a different solution if that is how the future plays out. The other thing that it's based on is a registration fee. That's one component of the funding formula.
Yeah.
And I like to, if we're going to modify any part of that formula, to me, the short-term answer is to look at the registration fee. Because I like to look at it and say, if you took your family down to Great America and wanted to enjoy the day at Great America, you'd pay for parking and you'd pay for admissions. If you went just by yourself, you would pay more to park and admit yourself into Great America, to have unlimited use of that park, that theme park, and all the rides in it for one day. You would pay more for that than you would pay to have unlimited access to all of Wisconsin's roads for 365 days in a year.
Goodness, that's an interesting way to put it. Now, granted, I've never been to Great America, but I've driven past it a lot. But that's an interesting way to view that. Yeah.
Yeah, think about it. I mean, our roads it's a built environment. They need to be maintained. They need to be rebuilt over time. That costs money, and we just expect it to be there. And we want to keep our registration fee low. So regardless of whether you use the road once a day, and I use the road 10 times a day, either way, we both have the same expectation in the morning when we get up, that the road will be passable.
Yeah.
That it won't have a whole bunch of potholes. Right? That
Yeah,
it'll be safe and secure, right? And we can drive safely on it. We have the same expectation regardless of use.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting. This transportation thing is probably going to be something I ask everybody in some way, shape, or form who comes in here. I've lived in Missouri, Colorado, New Mexico, Minnesota, Wisconsin. I've never seen a more different climate than Wisconsin, especially this region, actually. I mean, northern Wisconsin is certainly different than southern Wisconsin. Meaning we could get to 115 degrees, we could get to -30, and what that does to roads. You don't see that in Missouri, you don't see that in Kansas, you don't see that even in Minnesota, actually. So it's it's no easy task for those in state government to find a way, a proper formula to fund it, and then for those who actually do the work also, right, to make sure that it's sustainable.
Well, and what complicates the matter even more is that, coupled with the fact that based upon the era that Wisconsin developed and the industries that were present when we developed, we have more road miles per capita than 3/4 of the states.
Wow. Yeah, that I didn't know.
Yeah.
We have a lot of good places to go, thankfully. So
Right.
yeah, we do plenty of traveling.
So we have more than our fair share of road miles, and we have a weather climate that complicates the road maintenance. So
Yeah.
we're going to have to make some challenging and difficult decisions going forward about not just the funding side of it, but also I think about the spending side of it. Just because we build a road doesn't mean that we are perpetually obligated to make sure it's maintained in pristine condition. We have
That's just not really always possible.
It's not.
Again, because of the climate that we have.
Right.
So yeah. Couple more topics before we get to the fun stuff. Education. There's been some gains in education. My kids are 6, 5, and 3, as you know. One goes to private school in 3K, and then I have 4K in kindergarten at a public school. But talk to me about the gains in education that one we've seen across the state, and then the increase in funding that Governor Walker put forward.
Right. You know, that's the biggest secret out there, I think. I can't tell you how many people have said that, you know, we're decreasing funding in education. And I say, well, you got your facts wrong. Because in our current budget, we invest more money in education as a state than we have ever invested in education in our history. More than any other previous budget.
And we're talking from an operational standpoint, correct? Not
Yeah.
from a capital improvement program.
No, just from an operational standpoint, just from an annual funding perspective, not, you know, because the capital stuff are done at the local level, those are local decisions, typically by referendum.
Yeah, and believe me, we'll have somebody on to talk about that at some point. So we'll focus on the operational state level.
So we're investing more in K-12 education than we've ever invested before. And what's great about some of the reforms that have been done is that we know that those dollars are invested directly in the classroom, directly for the benefit of our students. And we're seeing the results. Kids' test scores are going up, performance is going up. I mean, we're having really good results. So I'm excited about what the future holds. I also think we have some opportunities, and I've been having a number of conversations really since I got to the legislature about some of our workforce issues and how we can address those. And I think our biggest gains that we can make is investing in early childhood education, and in particular in communities where we have the highest rates of unemployment, where we have some of the highest judiciary problems and incarceration issues. If we invest, the studies of, you know, I've read study after study, they all suggest that investing in early childhood education has substantial gains, both academically as well as career and professional pursuits down the road. So, you know, how we exactly accomplish that, and where the investments are made, and how we can get the legislature on board, those are my challenges before me.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I've got involved in PTA. I represent Prairie Elementary School on the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. Gotten to know the principal and the educators very, very well. And I agree, it's not necessarily this school is bad or that school is good. I think the parents' engagement with the educators is very, very important. It's valuable. And I agree on the early part of education. I've seen that spike in my children in their education, and just the way they speak, the way they engage with other kids, whether you're at the park. So I encourage more of that. I think that's great, and I appreciate it.
Well, and you have a great family and a great household, and you and your wife are caring parents. You're involved. You invest in your kids. Not every child has the fortunate circumstance of being born into the right family, and having that right support structure. So what do we do in those circumstances? Just say, oh, well, write it off? Or do we figure out as a society that those kids are still worth investing in? And
Yeah, which they are.
And how do we invest in them? And
Yeah. Again, the last couple of years, I've really, I mean, I've spent time in the classroom with the kids. I've gotten to know the teachers and the principal really well. And he shared with me, you know, a lot of, there's some kids that are borderline homeless that come to the same elementary school that my kids do. And they're invested, and that's a good thing. And it's nice to see that the state invested in them as well. So, one last topic before we get to the fun stuff.
I thought this was fun.
Well, it's good. I thought about that when I went through this in my head. I'm like, Scott and I are going to think everything we already talked about was fun.
That's right.
Which it is, I know, for us.
Yes.
So one more fun topic before we get to the different topics.
Okay, sounds good.
Medicinal cannabis, or how many people view it as medicinal marijuana. There are roughly 30 states in the country who have legalized it. We have a version of it in Wisconsin, and there are about a dozen counties in the state that will or possibly have an advisory referendum in November. And I can tell you there possibly may have a city that will discuss this in the next month or so. I just wanted to get, I know we have a mutual constituent who is dealing with this. They have a person in their family who's dealing with some medical issues. And wanted to get just briefly your views on it.
Whenever something from a health or an injury standpoint affects us personally, we become very much invested in it. And we care deeply about the people that are involved, and we will search for any possible remedy, any possible thing that can help. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I don't have that level of expertise and knowledge, but what I do know is that in the United States, we have a process for approving drugs for medical use.
Mm-hmm.
And we have that process, I think, for good reason. You know, if there were a company that said, hey, we've got this miracle cure for cancer, and you just take this pill and it'll make cancer go away. We want that remedy to be better.
Sure.
We want it to be evaluated, and we want to have some certainty when we begin to distribute that drug, that it doesn't have any harmful side effects, that it is going to do what it promises to do, what it's billed to do. If we're going to invest, hundreds or thousands of dollars in the use and application, that we want to make sure there's some efficacy there. So why would we throw that process out as it relates to cannabis? Right now, it is considered under our federal government, Food and Drug Administration, considered a felonious, if I can say that word, drug. That's
good verbiage.
Yeah, that it's a restricted drug. It's not allowed for public dissemination. So should we have politics at the local or state level pushing the federal government or pushing to deregulate that or legalize that? Should politics dictate that, or should we go through the same standard process that we go through with other drugs? There are significant adverse effects of cannabis. That today, the cannabis drugs that are available today are significantly more potent than what what people think. There's this perception that cannabis is harmless, and yet you talk to folks in the judicial side of things, you talk to folks in the law enforcement side of things, you talk to medical doctors, there's still a lot of concern about it, both from a gateway drug standpoint into other areas. But we have had in the state of Wisconsin an opioid crisis.
Yeah.
And much of that has come from legally prescribed drugs.
Right. Yes.
And that's gotten out of control. So now we want to introduce another drug that has adverse consequences as a legal status. Yes, our heart goes out to those individuals who want and are needing help. But we also have to approach it with a great degree of due diligence and care as we would any other kind of drug.
I agree.
It's complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a difficult topic.
Yeah.
One that, certainly needs plenty more research. So, all right, well, on to the
More fun stuff.
more fun stuff. What was your first concert? What was it like?
First concert.
Music concert. Yeah.
Well, I don't, when you get as old as I am, you start to lose track of the exact
You're not
sequence of
old.
things.
How old are you, by the way?
I'm 52.
Are you really?
I am.
Man, I didn't think you were. Sorry. I thought you were a lot younger than that.
So I saw, when I was young, I saw the Cars in concert. I saw AC/DC in concert. I saw Foreigner in concert. All good shows. I think I also saw, I want to say 38 Special. If you
Okay.
remember that group.
Yeah, I know that group.
The first one, I don't know which one was the first one. Sequence, I don't know.
So if you could see anybody right now,
Any of those groups?
well,
Right.
actually, no, anybody right now, who would you see?
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of really good talent.
Let's just say you get free tickets to Summerfest and anybody could be there. Who would you go see?
Well, my favorite artist right now is my daughter. She's
Your oldest daughter?
my youngest daughter. She is.
Oh.
She's got a fantastic voice, and she's a singer-songwriter, and she has an incredible range.
Really?
She's a budding, just budding young artist. So
What kind of music?
she does a range. It's sort of a vocal jazz R&B kind of quality to it.
Okay.
Some of her models are like a Ella Fitzgerald or Alicia Keys or Adele.
I love Alicia Keys. Yeah.
So I'm biased. That's who I would prefer to see today. But
I know a Packer bar in downtown Nashville. She could probably perform that, by the way.
there's
For those who don't know, Scott's daughter attends a great college in Nashville.
yeah,
so
my oldest daughter.
he spends time there. Yeah, there's a place on 2nd Street that I've been to a couple times.
Okay.
It's not just country. They do a lot of different stuff.
What's great about the Packers is you can go anywhere in the country and find a Packer bar.
Yeah, I was sitting there. I had a Badger shirt on, and somebody next to me, I ordered some food, and they're like, "You from Wisconsin?" I'm like, "Yeah, from Waukesha." And then somebody next to me was like, "Oh, we're from Kenosha." I'm like, that's where all the Wisconsin
Yep.
people go.
Yep,
is to
yep.
that place. So, but they do a variety of music there. Again, on 2nd Street. So, who's your favorite athlete?
Favorite athlete? Probably Aaron Rodgers.
That's been the same answer for everybody so far.
The guy's
Yeah.
awesome. He's just he's incredible talent.
And he's invested in Milwaukee.
He is.
now, so
In the Bucks even.
part owner of the Bucks. So yeah, he's got to be the best quarterback I've ever seen. With all due respect to Tom Brady, Rodgers is better. So, and then final question, kind of a desert island type question.
Okay.
So I'm giving you a DVD player with unlimited power.
Okay.
You have 2 DVDs to take with you for the rest of your life. What movies are they?
Well, speaking of the deserted island, Castaway is one of my favorite movies.
That was one of them last week too.
Maybe it's the deserted island question that prompts it in your people's minds. That's a great movie. My favorite movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard to beat that one.
I can watch that movie probably 2 or 3 times a year. There's so many important messages in that movie. I first discovered that movie when I was a teenager in high school, and my mom was sound asleep on the TV, and I was turning the channels. Remember how you had to turn the channels with the
I do
knob?
remember. I'm actually old enough to remember that at my grandparents' house.
And I was turning the channels, and I came across this black and white movie, and I'm like, "What's this?" And I sat down and watched, first couple minutes of it just to see if it was interesting, and I was hooked, and I was compelled. It has such a great message, and within a year, our high school at the time had a number of kids committing suicide, and that movie touches on the value of life and how important it is, and how we our lives touch so many other lives.
Yeah.
That I went to the principal, because I was serving as the class president in my senior year. I went to the principal and said, "I'd like to show this movie to our class." And he said, "Well, all right, what about the whole school?" I said, "Sure." So we arranged for that movie to be brought in, and each class had a day or half a day over 2 days where the entire school was shown that movie to speak about how valuable each person's life is. And so that movie it will always be my favorite.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm going to ask one more, if that's okay. Just because I'm a big I YouTube speeches all the time, every day, in fact. And this is kind of an interesting question. What is your favorite speech you've ever seen? It doesn't have to be live or online, but what's your favorite speech that you've ever listened to?
That's a good question.
And I have mine, and I'll share. I'm actually going to answer this with myself too.
Good.
But
That'll be my question to you. What's your favorite speech of all time?
well, let me go first then.
Go ahead.
And I'll let you think about it. Jimmy Valvano, his SV speech in 1993.
Mm-hmm.
I watch it every day. In fact, I referenced it. I got to give it. I love giving speeches, actually, and I got to give one at an Eagle Scouts ceremony last week, and I referenced where you were, where you are, where you want to be. And this gentleman is getting his Eagle Scout. He's watched my kids too, as your daughter has. So those people hold a special place with me.
Yeah.
But that's my favorite speech. I watch it
Every day.
every day.
Wow. How long is it?
About 11 minutes.
Wow.
And
So it's your source of
he
inspiration.
tells you up front, I'm going to talk longer than everybody else, because he's dying of cancer.
Yeah, right.
And so he understands the value of time.
Yeah.
And that kind of reminds me of that same thing.
Yeah. Of course, there's the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech, which is classic. But Ronald Reagan was one of the best communicators of all time.
Yes, he was.
And I think what stands out to me was his address to the country after the space shuttle accident.
1986.
Yeah. And he had an incredible way of touching the American soul.
Yeah.
And saying what we wanted him to say at the moment when we wanted him to say it. And that's an incredible ability as a speaker to be able to do that.
Yes. I completely agree. Yeah, I was 6 when that happened. So I didn't completely understand everything.
Yeah.
But
And how old are you?
I'm 38.
38!
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't feel 38. I'm like George Strait. I still feel 25 most of the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, thank you,
My
Representative Scott Allen, District 97. For those, I know we publicized Amanda Medina Roddy being here today. She had a family issue, was not able to attend. We'll have her on another time. And for those who also know, Scott and I ran against each other in 2014 in the Republican District 97 primary. So hopefully this shows that people who run against each other can still get along and be friends. So thank you, Scott.
You bet. My
Appreciate
pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it.